Like many others, I have advanced in film and TV, thanks to this beautiful city being the third largest production center in North America, only behind Los Angeles and New York. But we are a service industry, let's be honest there. Our wonderful city can pose as Seattle, New York, and our friends down south can tell their stories so conveniently here. With an abundance of infrastructure and lucrative tax credits, and frankly, one of the deepest talent pools in the world, we're always ready to work and we're always ready to tell our stories. But then why is it that creatives here have such a hard time telling their narratives and having the opportunity to have the showcase of that? So that is the purpose of the panel that's coming up next and is our closing panel for this evening, making Vancouver a key player for global film and TV deals. And we're going to go further into that with this panel. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Andrew Uy. Started Echelon Talent Management in 1994, and today Andrew represents some of the top Asian actors in film and television. I'd love to invite Andrew and our panelists. Our final panel for the night on how Vancouver can be the it place.
Hi everyone, so I guess this is not the Jerry Springer show.
Not yet.
Anyway, we are here this evening to talk about how we can make Vancouver a key player for global film and TV deals. I think Ritesh has done a very good job of introducing the topic, so I will just skip this page. And let me introduce the panelists for today. Today we have Subi Liang. Subi Liang is an old friend of mine. She's a veteran producer from Hong Kong who now calls Vancouver home. Her credits include the Silver Bear winning Isabella. And in 2010, way before internet web series became anything, she produced a Chinese web series called 4 Nights of Strange Tales, starring Zhou Xun, which got up to 400 million clicks within 2 months. Breaking records for Chinese online streaming films. She has also produced all of subsequent Pang Ho-cheong directed films. Director Pang is actually in the audience today, so welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And she formed Bravo Pictures, focused on film and TV commercial productions, global distribution, marketing, and promotions. As of today, the company has distributed over 100 titles globally. Her production company is now based in Vancouver, Vancouver, Canada, not Vancouver, Hong Kong, goodness. With subsidiaries in Hong Kong and Singapore, concentrating on production development from North America to Asia. Subi. Next to her is Janice Chua, who is Vice President of Imagine International. Thank you for flying from LA to Vancouver. She managed the development and production of local language content in Asia, including Taiwan crime stories on Disney+. Janice also served as one of the producers on Crazy Rich Asians, and she was born and raised in Singapore and started her career in China, where she was in international film sales, and then she became Director of International at Beijing Galloping Horse, where she oversaw international business and co-productions such as John Woo's The Crossing.
Thank you.
Next to Janice is Osric Chow, who is quite well known, or very well known to Vancouverites. He's a Chinese-Malaysian filmmaker, and he's been a working actor here for over 20 years, and known for shows like Supernatural, 2012, and even as the Actman in an Alternate Universe in CW shows like The Flash and Legends of Tomorrow.
I'm also one of your clients.
Yes, he's also one of my clients. Yes, he is.
Throw that out there.
Managed him for a long, long time. I'm very proud of him. Over the last 5 years, Oscar has produced 3 features and several shorts, including one that he directed. And he recently moved back to Vancouver after living in Los Angeles for the last decade. Oscar is actively developing feature films, scripted and unscripted series, with creative engines coming out of Vancouver, and he set roots back here in his hometown of Vancouver.
Thank you, Andrew.
And finally, we have Doug Louis. Doug is a Vancouver-based venture capital partner, actively involved in social and sustainability investment projects in Canada, the US, Asia, and Europe. With over 25 years of corporate finance and entrepreneurial experience across media, tech, hospitality, and banking industries, he's held several executive roles in Universal Studios and Universal Music, based in their Los Angeles and New York HQs. He returned to Vancouver recently, and he was also a group executive in a global luxury hotel chain and a VP in the world's largest integrated resort based in Hong Kong. He is a VC, Doug is particularly interested in impact investment, especially when it relates to POC representation in media sector. He has recently launched the first Asian American celebrity-backed beverage with Kevin Kreider, if I'm right. And as a VC, he's always sourcing transnational projects with social impact across Canada and Asia.
Money guy.
Thank you.
He's the money guy.
Money guy. Shout out to Song.
I should sponsor the event today, right?
You know what? I should just say that. You know what? He's the money guy.
Yes.
And that's all the time we have today.
Yeah, exactly.
Just go to him with that.
Yeah, we'd like a stack of pitch decks right there. He'll look through them later.
Anyway, let's start the discussion. You know, it's a very big topic, and Vancouver's in a very interesting place today, right? There's work stoppage because of what's happened in the U.S. Inflation is at an all-time high, but yet, you know, I love Vancouver. I love this city, and I call it home now, like a lot of other people. I think, like, Oscar, were you born here?
I was born and raised here, yeah.
He was born here. How do I not know that?
Well,
I should
that's
know
fine.
that.
He's been asked that
Never told
question,
you.
where you're from.
I
Never
know.
told you.
Yeah, you did. But basically, there are a lot of immigrants here, and we bring a lot of different voices to this country. But at the same time, what I feel is that we have come to a place where a lot of it is just in English or French, and we really cater as a production service town to the US, right? So what do you think we need to do to help Vancouver or BC grow to the next level? We obviously have the talent and skilled labor here, so why do creators here find it so difficult to level up? You know, let's hear your thoughts on this. Osric?
Yeah, I can start here. Why? I think it's a lot of things. One, I think it's because they pay us too well. So production service, Vancouver has a reputation of being production services aren't for LA, right? And why? It's because we have really good companies here that can access Canadian tax credits, which is the Canadian producers' equity going into all these projects. And when you have that, then they pay you a good chunk of money to do the thing. And if you've ever talked to any production company, whether it be director, producer, executive, that have gotten to the point of like cranking out these MOWs, doing CW shows, like they're comfortable, right? They can do all these creative stuff. They know how the business works at that point. But when you really do the math, they're like, okay, well, you know, Hallmark director can do 5, 6 movies a year if they're really pushing it. They have that passion project they really want to do, but it'll take them 6 months, so they have to turn down 3 big paychecks. Do you take that chance? And I think for a lot of creatives here, they don't, because they don't know if you're, you know, we don't know if we're ever gonna have another job. So it's so hard to do that. And then everyone who's not at that level, like we're training ourselves to fill out forms and check off these boxes. You know, like how many people are creatives in this room? I'm just curious. How many of you have ever tried to access any kind of public funding, CMF or whatever? How much time do you spend on that? And do you find that you're spending more time on that process than actual creative work? Right? So I think there's a lot of a lack of education, and the people that have gotten to the point where they understand the system and how to access, you know, funding for, you know, private equity for these projects that actually have any legs of making it in the marketplace rather than just like doing a film festival run. Those people don't feel that security to do it, or, you know, they're trying to buy a house in Vancouver and so they can't, right? So a lot of reasons, but
I'll leave Janice,
it.
what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to chime in. I feel, okay, so I run the international division for Imagine, which means I produce internationally in different territories, right? So every country presents a very unique set of problems, right? But I think the common problem has always been development is not incentivized. So production service is like the least risky business of it all, in the entire food chain, right? Because someone has already footed the bill, someone is going to hire a production company to do management, right? But when it comes to development, we all know this. You develop 10 projects, one gets sold, and you produce 10, one makes money, right? So I think, like, for an industry to grow, right, it's really about the ecosystem, So there's no doubt that there's great crew here in Canada, but the key is how can you create creative capital, right? And I think, I mean, I'm not Canadian, so please forgive me if I say something wrong, but I feel. You're not too. No, you are. You are in 3 months. So, I came from a very small country called Singapore, right? And we also suffer from the same problem in the sense that we're very multi-ethnic, we're multilingual. We serve like a hub for production in Southeast Asia. Right, but there's also a lack of, creative capital, right? So the government has been providing funds and rebates and all that, right? And all that is great, because it allows filmmakers to pursue their passion project, allows filmmakers to make good projects. And I think we benefited quite a bit, right, with Anthony Chen, Bu Jingfeng, and all that, right? However, when there's money, right, and there's not enough talent to fill in the gap for the pipeline. What I mean by talent is, producing talent, directing talent, and also for the ecosystem to be healthy and to be holistic, we need to make, these products into a business, right? So when grants and incentives and rebates are very project-based, it is not a business. It's only a business when there's a pressure, and I know that filmmakers hate this, when you are pressured to have ROI, guys, it's a real thing, then it becomes a business, right? So how can you present, your idea, your product, your packaging, to potential investors, to convince them that, hey, this will at least break even. Right? And I feel like that kind of scale needs a lot of nurturing, finding good creative producers who understand commerce, knowing how to package, knowing how to do regional co-productions, learning how to leverage, right? So my point is, how do you make a case for yourself, So as a Imagine executive who's running international division, when I go into a new territory, I'm always looking for talent, IP, right? And then hopefully Imagine can bring like the business. Does that make sense?
Yep, totally. Thank you so much. And Subi, with that in mind, what are your thoughts on how we can bring?
I think we have skilled, talented people who provide really great production service to Hollywood. But I think we need to step forward, and then we need to have our own story, have our own productions. But by doing that, I think we need to give opportunities to or like groom creators.
And by these stories, you're talking about diverse stories as opposed to in English and maybe Mandarin or English and Punjabi, is that right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And Doug, you...
Money.
When can we have money?
Ching.
Doug.
Well, what is your
Pull out that
perspective? What is your perspective on all of this?
Yes, I hear all these wonderful creatives and talk about the concepts and things that need to happen to build the ecosystem. It sounds like we have a lot of track records in terms of production, in terms of talent pool, in terms of even to a degree distribution, but I think it sounded like that we've been perceived more of a backlogged of the process, right? Instead of the drivers and money guys, they love to know who's in charge, who's writing the check, or who's green lighting this. And if they're not here, they're not going to talk to the people here. They're going to go back to the legacy system, which are the studios, all the big bosses. Now, I think one thing we can do, especially from a venture capital perspective, we are a little different than the traditional financing arm of some of these firms. We are willing to take risk. We do startups. We look at pure potential. We look at what can happen or what may happen, not just like what have you done or prove to me all the financial performance you have done in the last 10 years. We are ready to try something new. And I think from a creative perspective, it's actually a good match.
So in that sense, because a lot of the funding that's provided here is government-based. And unfortunately, with government-based funding, they give I won't say priority, I'm not even sure what word I'm looking for, but because there's so much more English language product out there, and there's so much more competition within the English language medium, and even French, what if there was a fund of some sort, or where we could develop synopsis, or stories within this community?
Absolutely.
What do you think of that?
Andrew is basically
He's
asking
pitching
you
it.
for money. For the minorities,
write the
which I
check
thought,
right now.
yeah, I mean,
Don't just write it, but make sure you sign it.
We need a lot of channels, like
Absolutely.
yeah,
I think so.
beside
I
the
agree.
governments.
which is
Yeah.
why we're all looking
Private
this way.
We need a lot of zeros.
Can I just chime in for
Please
a
do.
bit?
Please do. It's a
Okay.
conversation.
I mean, like, it's a very logical problem, right? So I feel that, okay, let's talk about the logic, which is like sometimes the worst case scenario, and the facts, right? Which is when you take away film and TV aside, when you're trying to create a product, right? You're always trying to, as a normal person with common sense, right? You're always asking, where is the biggest market, right? So naturally, film funds and film financing, they go to the majority.
Correct.
When I phrase it this way, it doesn't sound so political, correct?
Correct. It doesn't.
So that's just logic, right? Which is why, I feel like filmmakers cannot avoid business talk, meaning how can you position yourself, as a project, that can make money, right? I don't know whether you guys were at the keynote that Bing spoke yesterday, right? I mean, unfortunately, as minorities, we have double standards to live by. Not only we have to over-excel, to get equal chance, sometimes it's really hard to pitch our story, right? But he said something that resonated, which is, we're not just making a minority story, we're making good stories, right? So I feel like, there's a theory, again, I'm not Canadian, but I can pull some references, right? So I remember reading, a report, about America, like what is the demographic 50 years from now? Because this generation of young people are very different. There are more interracial marriages. There are more immigrants. So the minority market is going to grow, right? So with that in mind, how can you create a business plan so that people like Doug, can convince his investors to write a check? Is this a nice segue for you?
Well, just to put it in context further, 46% of Vancouverites identify as European Canadians, which means 54% of us identify as being part of a minority group. And what it is also is that English may be the most widely spoken language in the world with 1.3 billion speakers, but Mandarin is a close second with 1.16, and Hindi with almost 700 million. So together, that almost makes 2 billion, right? Yeah. So why can't we tell more of these stories, from Canada, where it's such a multicultural place?
Absolutely. So then make it that way, right? I mean, to represent the Canadian story, it needs to be multicultural. I think that's part of the equation that the private guys will be looking for. Because one thing I've been hearing is that Canada has a really strong government sponsorship program and funding, though it takes a lot of paperwork, time, resource to get there. But the downside is that people might be overly reliant on using that system. There is private money out there, but we just haven't been, or I haven't been seeing them, wink, wink, over my desk. So I think there is a lot of private equity or private individuals or funds who would be interested in tapping in this. I mean, it cannot be higher risk than just some, conceptual, magical product that someone's trying to sell on Shark Tank. It's not that different. A lot of times creative have a very comprehensive storyline. They have the actors line up, the talent, the production, everything's ready to go. Just get a good business plan, good business pitch. We are used to it in the VC world, venture capitalist world. Then there you have a lot of opportunities in pitching it to folks like myself, my firm, and we have access to capital not just in Canada, but also in Asia, in Middle East, in Europe, in other places where they are happy to invest in a cross-national project that may talk about Asians in Canada, Middle Eastern in Canada, or Canadians in over those countries. There's a lot of these stories are wonderful to tell, but someone needs to start pitching to these guys and say, hey, we can do a good job. We can make you the financial returns you're looking for.
So tell you what, Doug, if you can bring these finance people over next year to another event like this, we will show up.
Yeah.
Barbara is very
Definitely.
happy. Barbara is
Next
very
year.
happy.
Sorry?
Barbara is very happy to hear this, right? To bring finance. I don't know. I don't know what she is. But I just want to talk about, that business part, right? Because Subi and I were producers, we talk to financiers all the time, right? I think, and I don't know if this sounds very basic and educational, please forgive, I think usually what the financiers are looking for is, business plan, packaging, So I think the beautiful thing about film and TV business is that there's something passionate and creative about it, but at the same time, because it is still a business, so how do you tread that line, right? So talking to producers are actually very helpful. I feel like sometimes a lot of filmmakers, they don't realize that producers can be very helpful that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think BC maybe needs to create more programs to connect the young film makers with experienced producer. I want to share a plan, a funding plan from Hong Kong. They launched last year. The Hong Kong Film Development Council, they have a platform. They will do the funding for selected projects, and they will line up a world-class experienced producer to pair up with the Hong Kong film makers to produce film. I think we should do something like this.
And maybe that's something that EXNW can do.
Yeah,
right?
other words, collaboration.
Collaboration.
Yes,
Intersectionality,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because the data that you presented was astounding, right? So they actually more than 50% are minorities, right? So what is the intersectionality here? What is the regional co-production that we can do here? And also because I think she comes from Hong Kong, and I learned a lot from Hong Kong. I think what Hong Kong did very well in the past was there was such a fluid conversation between the producers,
Very direct. Yeah.
Producers, directors, film financiers, pre-sales, sales agent. It's like a giant, ecosystem, right? And then when they decided that, okay, we got to export our film all over the world, it was like a collective effort, right? So in other words, filmmakers shouldn't feel so lonely.
I truly believe that. I truly believe that we all need to work together.
Yeah.
And also, there are a lot of filmmakers that we know, some of us know at least, that are in Canada. They're already Canadians or immigrants, new immigrants. But they're so well known in their own hometown. Like Hong Kong directors, Hong Kong or Chinese music people, actors. They're Canadians, but we don't even tap into that. I think Johnny To is Canadian.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Double identity.
But when Johnny To did Exiled, we were in Toronto International Film Festival together. We realized that the lead actress, the cinematographer, the director, there was a whole bunch of Canadians there that theoretically it could have been Canadian
Many
content.
actors too.
I worry they don't know who Johnny To is.
Oh,
Hong Kong gangster director.
Yeah,
amazing.
legendary. Yeah.
Legendary director. director.
But how, Subi, maybe you can also, help, illuminate
up that
how we can
program.
invite them out into these things,
Yeah.
to bring them forward, because we want to meet them.
I would
think
say,
it's
like,
important for people that
It's so helpful. So I've produced 3 feature films, and I learned stuff, of course. But this last year, having just shadowed producers, going out of my way to like reach out to people I've worked with when I'm on set, I hover over Video Village, and I just ask questions. And just by doing that, shadowing directors, I've learned more this last year than I had producing 3 feature films, right? And going through the entire process, because I didn't learn the business side, but now talking about how they're packaging these things, how they're taking it off, like how this project came to be, the inception, the idea to like finding the financing, attaching the stars, and just like hearing that stuff, like everything just clicked. In a way that I never really understood when I was making these movies, because you're just so focused on the art. And so I think, that marriage between art and commerce is so important. I think as artists, we always lean towards the art, but until you start doing business, and I started a restaurant at one point, it was fully on the commerce side. I'm like, okay, there's got to be something in between that really like makes everything align. And I think like moving forward for my 4th one, that's what we're trying to do, right? But like spending time with seasoned producers who have done it, it's invaluable, that experience.
So Subi, but back to you, how can we bring them out? Is there a place?
We need help from the private investor or government money by doing so,
I think,
actually,
I think what you're saying is, again, incentivize development, right?
Yes.
Because development is so risky, Okay, so like I am a production company executive, right? So unlike filmmakers, I don't focus on just one project. There are easily 15 to 20 projects on my slate because I'm answerable to a corporate company that needs to make money. Right, so which is why I feel like it's really how can we create a system to incentivize development? And I know that the government of Canadian has done very well by providing funds, but maybe the private sector, can also start endorsing and investing in local talent, because like the crew is great, right? But producing, writing, development, we need that, right?
I think part of the conversation we had earlier was about moving up the value chain. I think that's very important. So if you look back in some other economies, like especially Asian economies like China, Korea, Japan, a lot of them gone through this manufacturing process of doing the back office work, production work for European brands, right? But over time, they start developing the creative capital, the IPs, the branding, and then they become their own powerhouse.
Correct, like Korea. Look at what it is today. In 2018, we were at the
when China
Shanghai Film Festival.
Yes, when China decided. Oh, is this too political to say?
I think it's okay.
When Koreans couldn't show their faces anymore, how
in
about
China.
that?
China
Right.
banned Korea.
China banned Korea, right? I think it's in the news, so it's not political.
It's old news. It's old news. But what Korea had to do was pivot, and that was in 2018, and they pivoted and focused more on the U.S. And that's when CJ really started investing heavily in the U.S. And Blackpink and BTS, they started not because originally they had if I remember you saying they
were recruiting
singers.
Chinese members to be K-pop stars, right? And then when the Korean ban happened, they started recruiting from US and Southeast Asia, right? So this is a case study for CJ. Let's not just talk because it's a film and TV business, right? So when we say think of your product as a business, I'm not asking you to kill your creative soul and go after money. I'm just saying that you need to build a case for your creative cause to be successful. For example, right? If you're running a company, like how do you look into your slate? So using CJ's example, when they were expanding into overseas territories, what they did very well was they remade their IPs.
Yes, they did.
So are the projects on your slate, do they have high remake value? right? Because if there's high remake value, you can convince an investor, hey, you deficit finance this, and then we can flip this like a real estate thing in other countries, you know? So like that's how CJ, right? They built real estate, like literally cinemas in all over the world. And then they invested in local talent to remake their IPs for the local market, right? So that's a very business way to approach your creative ideas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would say that one thing that really helped me, when I was shadowing a director, one thing that I learned was just how little power a director had, certainly on a TV thing. And there was a logistical creativity that they had to exercise. Like, okay, there are certain things I want, but we're limited by time, resources. And so how do I do what I want within these parameters? And so I think when I've approached film in that same way, I'm like, okay, there are certain types of films that sell more than others, right? Certain genres that are easier to sell, certain things that, like dramas, I used to love dramas, and then I realized that a lot of them are vanity projects, and you kind of need like the biggest A-list star to even have a chance at doing them. I'm like, so probably not gonna do that route, right? So like, what are the parameters that we can be creative within? And I think maybe that's something that we can kind of help like creatives, like check these boxes. If you're doing horror, make sure there are these elements that will translate to a trailer, which a distributor will buy, you know, sight unseen because
study the market,
Study the market.
you know, think of your career as a long-term thing. I think also filmmakers fall into the trap that I got to make this movie. It's a do or die moment. No, your career is not going to stop here, right? Have a slate, think long-term.
And then when it comes to, you know, when it comes to packaging it together, find the right director.
Or find the right manager. Like
Or find the
yourself.
right cast, right? You don't always have to look to Asian American cast. There's some really good Canadian actors who actually mean something globally, right? Look for them. You know, Osric just did a movie with Karina Lam, right? And Worth the Wait. And she's Canadian.
She's Canadian.
Yeah, she's Canadian. Didn't you produce that? Isabella. Oh, that's Isabella Law. Sorry, wrong actress. But anyway, I think that, you know, that helps open the marketplace so that you're not just selling to North America or to English language territories, but with Karina in the movie, you can sell to Asia, right? I mean, I got signaled earlier that we're running a little bit shy on time. Maybe we could open to questions from the floor. What do you think?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah? Does anyone have any questions for us? Oh, there you go. Right over there.
Shout it out.
Check. Yo, check. Hey, I know you guys are talking about money. There's a lot of, I don't know if the only thing I took away from that was money. But, oh yeah, to the point about, I guess I work in music myself. I've experienced a bit of the market in Asia and here as well. And you guys are talking briefly about like the whole, I guess, the K-pop phenom that's happening right now. And I guess kind of tying it back to, I guess, making Vancouver a more, I guess, global market. We could go towards that. But like, I wanted to get your opinion as to why like K-pop as an export was working so well. I know there's a government initiative to push it out into the market to boost GDP as well. But I mean, we have grants here as well. So why do we not have the infrastructure that does the same thing that they're doing, if that makes sense?
I think it's from a manager's perspective. I think that, yes, they've done really well. They train them really, really hard. But what it is that they put a lot of money in marketing. Yeah. Not enough money is put into marketing. You can make the product, but if no one knows about it, no one will see it. Whether, you know, it could be BC wines, for example. I love BC wines, but how many people really around the world know about BC wines? Because it's not marketed well. Canadians have never, in my mind, known how to really market their stuff well, except for maybe Lululemon and, you know, BlackBerry at one point in time.
Yeah. I think it comes down to investment, right? Like they knew they had an entertaining product. They kept pumping it out, and at some point it just caught wind, and they had a lot of it, right? Like how many BC films are made every year? I actually don't know the number, but I don't think it's a lot. But it feels like any racialized group whenever they have a movie come out, like Crazy Rich Asians, when that came out, it felt like a do or die moment for our community. Like if it didn't do well, it was gonna be back to normal, but it did. And like that weekend, I heard 6 projects got greenlit that were like featuring Asians as their lead, right? Like these things take time, but I think it's a snowballing effect. So like the more like parasites, everything everywhere all at once is that we have, like I think it'll inspire people to create more. Not everything is going to be a great idea, but we need the sheer numbers so that the top 10% are actually pretty decent, instead of like, okay, we don't really like this, but it's the only one, so we have to support it, right? We have to get past that point. But I think we just need more people to be doing it.
Any, I see someone with a question over there.
Wait, so I think Doug wanted to chime in on that.
Oh, sorry,
just
Doug,
really
please go ahead.
quickly, because I wanted to answer the question about the music industry, and it actually, relate to the film industry as well. I think one of the problem, which is a double-edged sword, pros and cons of living next to or being next to one of the largest economy or powerhouse, especially in an entertainment world in the world. That's the problem. So we see that same thing in the VC world. When you have really strong Canadian projects, companies, the first thing they do, go to America. They go to Silicon Valley. They go to New York for funding. The next thing you know, they became an American company, like Shopify or even Lululemon. And some of them just spend a lot of time in pitching to the big neighbor down south. So it's brand Canada that I think is a challenge of building it up. But if we don't start now, you will never get there. So we just need to be conscious. It's a double-edged sword. We can leverage that resource, but don't forget who we are.
Correct. I agree.
Andrew, I wanted to circle back to when you said, how do we bring in the producers? How do we bring in the people to come to these events? And I think a part of that comment is, how do we get the information out there from these producers who have the information? And I think one of the things to do so is podcasting, or these like audio platforms, right? I run an audio platform called BIPOC Credits that interviews BIPOC crew members working in the film industry literally for this reason. The only thing is, I'm having trouble like finding funding for good reason, because there is it's hard to find a suitable business model for something that's educational. And there is the dichotomy is like, how do you find funding for something when it's harder to do it for a project that isn't necessarily looking to get money out of it, but more for a more holistic perspective.
Can you get sponsors perhaps?
Yeah, I've been talking to a few companies for sponsorships, including Directors Guild of Canada, which I'm a part of, as well as a few other sources from gear houses, etc. But nothing that has been really sticking, especially because of this time of no one working. And so I guess the other follow-up question would be, Douglas, where do we find these potential investors who may be interested in funding these projects, considering that there is no guarantee of investment? Of course, there is that idea of, okay, let's try to be creative as to how to bring these projects to be more business-minded. But then, in a way, it defeats the purpose of the project, which is education, which is to bring out these, break the glass ceiling for these people who are wanting to break in.
Doug, do you have any ideas?
Well, it's a long answer, but I'll keep it short. The short answer is that just text me. But
Perfect.
I will do that, Douglas. Thank you.
I think a lot of times if you're Canadian and also being in Vancouver, we sometimes underestimate ourselves. So we are actually very well known across the world,
True.
Especially in Asia. You just came from Hong Kong. Everyone knows what Vancouver is, what they offer, the food, to the landscape, to the diversity, everything. is only because we are next to a huge neighbor. A lot of times we get overshadowed. So, but going back to that question, I think other than maybe some fine tuning in terms of the business, the financial side of what you are planning to do, but one thing I think we need to start doing is create an open platform and a direct channel to investment overseas. We don't have to just look south or even within the country. There are plenty of people in the, organizations, even countries who are very interested in what you guys have to offer.
Can I give an example for you? So masterclass is educational, right? And it started as a very, I think it's educational, but it's high concept, right? So how can you, my question to you is, how do you increase the scope of your podcast? Because it's already in the digital world, right? So if I see Mastercast as a film, they have great casting. So like, how do you apply the principle of casting for your podcast? And I know that it's very hard to do it grassroots, right? But first, I want to applaud that your attendance here is already like one step closer to it, And then I know it's going to be difficult, because to gain leverage to get to great casting is a long process, right? But like that is the same for all projects and every endeavors. We have to start from ground zero, right?
I think the principles of business still apply, right? Like I am not a woodworker, but I watch a lot of random woodworking videos that teach you how to. I've never tried to make wood, but I don't know why. I just watch it. It's entertaining. It's really well done, right? So if I think about your podcast, I'm like, okay, is there a way to make it more entertaining? Is there a way, or are you saying that there's not, and this is a problem we have, there's not that many people interested in creating, projects, right? There are not enough creatives. So is it that you picked a really small niche subject matter that there's not a lot of people who actually want to learn these things? Or do you just have to reach them in more creative ways, right? But there's like, just on film, there are no guarantees, of course, but I think it's up to you as a producer to mitigate risks wherever you can, right? And how do you get to the point where there's so many known variables that it doesn't feel like you're just throwing a dart with the blindfold on?
And with that, thank you so much, Osric. Thank you, Subi. Thank you, Janice. Thank you, Doug.